Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, alongside Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader. Today, we will discuss how to be a humane leader during a crisis like the Crowdstrike outage. Roberto, I hope you're not having any crises at the moment.
No, so far, and I won't. Thank you very much.
Good, good. And you know that there's been many major IT outages over the last couple of decades. I mean, it really, this latest one with CrowdStrike certainly had impacted a lot of businesses. Some of the other ones were very industry specific, but a humane leader, whether they know IT or don't know IT, in a crisis needs to apply a couple of skills and make sure that they don't make the situation worse. And one of the big things that I've seen happen during these kinds of crises from inhumane leaders is they begin to scream and panic, and they think they're rallying the troops to rise to the crisis by screaming and rushing. And that is the absolute opposite of what a humane leader should do in a crisis. And I liken it to some of the training that I've had in the past, both as a lifeguard, as a scuba instructor, also emergency responder in our work environment for accidents and things like that. And that is, you will see firemen work rapidly, but you will not see them running into a crisis. Lots of times the news says they run into the burning building, but that's actually not how they train them. They actually train them to calmly approach the crisis. Because if you're rushing and screaming and rallying your troops that this is a big outage, we need to do something right away, the likelihood they'll actually make an even bigger mistake and make the situation worse it goes up. So a humane leader first approaches a crisis to try and assess the situation and calmly think about what's going on. Sure, you need to get the troops together, get them alerted, and have some enthusiasm, but you certainly don't want to go rushing into the burning building and make the CrowdStrike problem worse.
Oh, yeah. And one thing is that they don't remain calm. And the problem with not remaining calm is that you you have a flood of ideas running through your mind, and that doesn't help because when you get calm, it's easier to form ideas and structure them and understand what to do and what not to do to go forward with the best solution or the best steps to overcome this problem. And I'm asking you, since you were a lifeguard and you have all these life-threatening situations, what is in your training when a crisis arrives, the thing that you as a leader have to do with a team?
One of the key things, and this applies to lifeguarding, it applies to IT, it applies to the crisis, is make sure you're assigning resources to do specific things. Because in a crisis, a lot of people their adrenaline gets up, they start to panic, and in many, like car accidents, house fire, etc., you'd be surprised at how many people freeze. Like they just don't know what to do. So it is okay to a degree for a humane leader to say, look, you, Roberto, start drafting a message to notify our users. Let's say we can't send email, prepare a text with our disaster recovery text distribution list. So the humane leader in the crisis starts to very specifically assign a specific task to somebody to do something. In a life-threatening situation, frequently that's you, Roberto, you call 911. Because one of the things that they find in crisis studies is everybody thinks somebody else called 911 and nobody did. So nobody called the fire department because everybody thought somebody else was doing it. So that humane leader sometimes is being a little bit of a dictator in terms of assigning a task to somebody, but they need to remain calm and decide what are the right things to do. And this is where a disaster recovery plan, if you've had one and you practiced it, starts to come into play. Maybe the Crowdstrike situation doesn't follow your crisis, your outage plan exactly, but there's certainly going to be aspects of it that would really apply. Getting somebody to draft the emergency message to everybody. If your email's not working, how are you going to notify people? Are you going to post signs on the doors entering the building? Hey, you can't log in, or if you log in, try to run this application, or, different things like that. So, again, a humane leader in that crisis needs to remain calm and start to divide up the work, because there are situations in an IT outage where sometimes, and maybe we can talk a little bit about your friend without giving away his identity, where you may be the lone fireman because it's a smaller company. Well, that humane leader doesn't know much about IT, so that humane leader can't help maybe diagnose the problem. But in that case, the humane leader says, hey, Roberto, what do you need me to do? What will reduce the stress on you? Hey, we need to get a message to our users. So, hey, humane leader, help me out. And, step one of our disaster crisis plan is to print signs to put on the door entering the building so people know that the barcode system's down on the manufacturing floor, or, whatever the crisis is.
Understood. Okay. Let me go with something that you mentioned. When you point out someone, it is to not differentiate the action from the rest, but the person pointed out, it feels that it has to do that specific action and take ownership of that. Am I correct?
Correct. Exactly. Because you're calling out that individual. So in a life-threatening crisis situation like that, lots of times people literally freeze. So this is where sometimes being super humane doesn't work as effectively. You may have to very specifically, Roberto, call 911. You, Roberto, you do it. And if you don't know their name because they're strangers, you might point or touch them to say, look, you call 911. You need to tell them what's going on. In the IT crisis, it might be, again, that you'd know people's names, but you might need to call on non-IT people to help you do some non-IT things to help prepare, whether it's printing the signs. Maybe it is as simple as a reboot once certain things have been reconfigured. Usually you can teach some non-IT people how to reboot more complicated pieces of equipment, routers, switches, etc. If you talk to them over the phone. So, you may have to use some non-IT people to do an IT thing in a crisis. And that's what a humane leader helps empower his team to think a little bit outside the box, to say, because every crisis is unique. Yes, you've got a disaster recovery plan. Yes, you've practiced it. But now when we're applying it, maybe there's some facets that are, not quite following the plan. So the humane leader needs to think about that and say, are there some things where we need to make an executive leadership decision and deviate a little bit from that? So maybe we're going to have some of the people in the marketing department who have communication tools post things on the Facebook page, or change the website of our homepage to say, we can only take cash orders right now. We can't do credit cards because Crowdstrike, shut down our point of sale system. So don't be afraid to think outside the box. We need a sense of urgency, but we don't need panic.
Yeah. Before we begin recording this episode, we spoke that in this scenario, such as a crisis scenario, we require a Superman, and we gathered to understand that maybe we require Superman, but we require a lead of superheroes. I think one thing that it is really important, and we have spoken in too many episodes, but not at least too many episodes as well. It is communication, clear communication, clear and crystal communication. In a crisis situation, I understand and I convey the message to my team and make them understand the impact of what is happening in a short period of time, minutes maybe, and tell them what is required for us as a team to deliver. And that means that if one person has to do a specific task and ends that task, raise a hand. Who needs my help? Doesn't stall, doesn't wait and sit and know what is going to happen. No, act. You had to act to see, okay, I have, using your example, maybe marketing is sending an email, sending communication. Okay, I have pretty writing skills. So I'll go along with marketing and say, hey, you know, how do I write? Do you want me to read your message and we could work on and maybe send it? Or go to, if you're IT, go to another IT department or person to do this. One thing that I have seen, and I totally think it's cool and it's okay, don't stick with your department. In a crisis, you could go with different departments and different person with different skills, and to see if you could help them, not being a burden, but helping because you recognize the skills that you have that maybe be a value to another person. So I think this is something that in a crisis, people could do. What do you think of that?
No, absolutely. You know, and again, the scale of the crisis is going to help you determine how many extra hands and brains do you need. So that humane leaders should think about, you know, oh wow, this crisis is really large, right? Hey, it's not only affecting our company. I saw in the news, Crowdstrike's impacting, you know, all the airlines and all this other additional outage. So it's not just us. This is going to be a big one. So start asking for that help early, right? Get other teams prepared to be ready to pitch in. Maybe you don't have an assignment for them quite yet, you know, a specific thing for them to do, but the humane leader starts to queue up some of those additional resources, especially when it starts to appear that it's going to go longer than just a few hours, right? After a while, it was pretty clear that CrowdStrike problem was going to be more than 24 hours. So if you have a business that runs 7/24, you're going to need to start thinking about, well, who can work on this problem at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Because we can't keep the same team awake 48 hours straight. I mean, it's humanly possible, but it's not effective and usually uncalled for and not necessarily healthy, right? So that humane leader starts to think about exactly that. You know, think about those resources, who can help you the best. Hey, I know the guy in the database group used to work on the server team as an operating system guy, so he'll know the language of IT of what's happening. So that person might be a good one to work with marketing on the message, you know, versus maybe having your telephone system person or your networking person who's always been working networking, doesn't always understand the operating system and some of the other security tools, might not be the best person because the vocabulary is so different in that discipline. So thinking about who to use where as quickly as possible and start to queue up those resources. Because again, you may not be ready to send a message to all your customers that you can only accept cash for the next 24 hours because it might take you 6 hours to decide that. But that doesn't mean that the humane leader isn't thinking ahead and preparing for that eventuality. So when the CEO says, look, this is impacting our sales, we need to get a message out there, the humane leader is ready with, okay, and I've got a person I want to work with marketing to get that messaging ready, and you know their name, and you've already pre-contacted them to warn them that this assignment is coming in the crisis. You know, the more you can keep your team calm, again, they know it's urgent, but keep them calm and thinking as a key part of that humane leader in a crisis. It's this balance of sense of urgency and duty to get things done, balanced with do it quickly but effectively, right? Don't make the problem worse by introducing things that might make it harder to diagnose what's going wrong, for example.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, today is Thursday. Last Friday was when this Crowdstrike problem appeared. Here in this continent, it was I think it was 5 or 6 a.m. when this happened. But in Europe or in Asia, they were in the afternoon or at night on a Friday. So you can imagine when this happened to many people around the world, and maybe they were either going home, going to a party, traveling, or something like that. And you, as a humiliator, what I would have done, and maybe some humiliators would have done or did, were to call them directly, not to text them, to call them directly. Hey, Chris, I know that you're in your home, but you know what is going on. I require for you to, and as you mentioned, to put out, but in this case by phone, to either go to a branch and help or from your home to do it. And for that, I will take the words that you mentioned at first. You have to to choose the resources and to do specific action, but you have to do that as a humiliator by recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of that person and to give them, I think, specific tasks, not big ones, specific tasks that they could accomplish fast. And with that, to be in a constant communication, either in a chat or to call them directly, but to do something. Because as we have spoken here in Latam, the commute time is way too big. So maybe some people going to their homes had to go back. So I think to wisely know what to do. Okay, I understand this lady lives 2 hours away. She's at home. It will be a waste of time to go 2 hours back to the office so she could work remotely and fix this. And maybe the ones who live close to the office could come here. So I think getting calm as a human leader and with the one-on-ones, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each of your team members will allow to act wisely and not a waste of time.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, because their time, you know, no matter how big the crisis is to the company, no matter how many tens of thousands or millions or even billions of dollars are being impacted, you know, the humane leader realizes that it's still impacting your employees' lives to work on the crisis. Maybe their job, they may be in operations, they may be on call 7/24 per the description of their job, but you need to be humane about it, right? And again, to your point of that 2-hour commute, why have that person do that drive? The crisis might be over by the time they get there, right? So maybe it's more effective to have the close person there working in the office. And then when they're tired and they need to go home and traffic is low, the person who lives an hour and a half away, they come in and start to work the 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. portion of the crisis, right? So you balance the negative impact to the team. And I like the part where you said you call them. You don't text them. You don't email them. This needs a human touch during the crisis because, again, it's very hard to convey urgency without panic, right? It's important to act quickly and effectively, but don't panic and rush. Again, you're the fireman at the fire. Assess the situation and walk into it calmly with the right tools. Don't go rushing in there with your fire axe and you haven't put on your fire coat and everything else to be safe, right? So I think that certainly in IT operations staff, they have a tendency to think of themselves as the Superman or woman and rush in to save the day. I know when I was younger and IT was more one or two persons, wasn't great big large groups. I liked being the fireman and saving the crisis and helping people solve their problems. But now with everything so much more complex than it was when I started, one person can't know it all. We need to humanely treat our resources and leverage their special skill sets at the right time, realizing that you may have to impose on somebody and get them to do something at 4 a.m. So talk to them interactively. Don't do it. Don't be a texter and text that. It's just, how do you convey that via text? Because when somebody reads it on text, they don't have the right context. They might read it and say, oh, he wants, my boss wants me to hurry on something. Whoop-de-doo, it's a text. I'm just going to pretend I didn't get it because I'm doing something else. I want to watch, I don't know, Downtown Abbey or something. I don't know, whatever TV show is popular at the moment. So definitely talking to them interactively is very critical in a crisis.
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you about this guy that I know. He is the only IT guy in a small company here in Mexico, and it is a hardware store. And this hardware store has 20 branches across the state. So when this happened was when they began opening all these stores, all these branches. And they found out, and suddenly he wasn't at the office. He was going to the office. And he was thinking about, and he told me all the stuff that he was going to do on the weekend. I'm going to rest, and he didn't. But the thing was, since it was only one IT guy and all the stores, all the branches were in across the state, he had to travel to each store and do several things, fix the problem. And since they couldn't record all the sales transactions and all the purchase and everything, they had to do it manually, reading. So the problem with that was that he had to transcribe all those notes, which some of them were legible and others wouldn't, and to his database. And he took all the weekend to do this, to achieve something like this. And I haven't talked to him since I think last Tuesday, in which he told me about this. But if I were his humane leader, what I would do is to obviously thank him for this endeavor that he got in without noticing, without asking for it. But what I would do would maybe several things. One of them was, first of all, we require a DRP, which we haven't. Second is, if I had to have more IT resources, I would do it. If it's not possible, what to do with the people in the branches? Should we train them? Should we give them a process which we had to update? What tools should we have for them to have? Maybe provide a laptop in which they to connect to our internet or something like that, that it is that it should be a spare laptop. I don't know, there could be many reasons, but one thing that is important is to thank this guy for all the things that he has done. That's the first one. And the second one, to give him maybe a couple of days or a day, if it's possible, for him to rest close to the weekend. Tomorrow's Friday, maybe take this long weekend. You deserve it. And to do something for him to get recognized. One thing what I would do is to recognize him uh, within all the other company. So that would be something good for him to his emotional skills and to put a name and last name to someone who did something heroic in this case.
Yes, absolutely. That recognition is a key step in there, is recognizing the effort that that this person did to deal with the crisis that they didn't cause and help the company continue to be successful. And you mentioned something, about how do we leverage others in a crisis. Given that it's such a small company, and odds are they're not going to hire a second IT person unless they've grown enough. But one of the things that we did when IT was much smaller is there usually is somebody who has an interest in things technical. They might work in sales, they might work in marketing, maybe they work in, given this is a hardware store, maybe they work in stocking, and they're, they have an interest in technology. Well, train them a little bit. They don't have to have all the IT skills, but if you can give them some basic skills and have some tools available for them that the IT person can communicate, because one of the things you mentioned, is could they have a laptop or something? And what we would do occasionally is we had laptops with remote control software. And so the remote person there didn't have much IT skills, but they could use the laptop and get it plugged in the right place. And they knew how to boot it up and get it logged in. And then you could use the video of the laptop and the controls of the keyboard and ask them, do you see the red light blinking here? And you already in your DRP had pictures of it with pointers that said, this red light in this corner, is it red or is it green? That kind of thing. Because I think in the small company situation is when humane leadership could maybe be more critical than in a large company, because you're going to have relationships already formed with a lot of other departments to help you in that crisis. And so the humane leader really needs to, in a crisis, leverage anybody he can to help his team be successful, whether that's in the team or outside the team.
Understood. And I think this kind of actions that we have spoken has a distinction between a humane leader and a boss. As you mentioned at first, a boss would yell, would not get calm, would point out the problems to someone else, but not acknowledge. One thing about a humane leader is that it will acknowledge that a lack of actions or processes were that he or she wouldn't think of before. So that decision would maybe not get the job easier, but it will get the job done.
Yep, I agree.
Great, man. Well, I trust that with this we can end this episode, and that you will have a crisis such as Crowdstrike had last weekend.
Yep, let's remain crisis free. You have a good weekend. Hopefully you can relax.